Okay, so creative profile, mobile apps, community, talent search. Next up, what's left are CC desktop applications. We've now added over 1,000 new features to our CC desktop applications since CS6 shipped across video and web and design and imaging and photography. Releases that take advantage of new hardware capabilities, keep you up to date with evolving formats, deliver incredible gains in performance, and make everyday tasks that much more efficient, and of course, make the things that were previously impossible suddenly possible, thanks to that Adobe magic we sprinkle in with every release. So to share more about our next major update to our CC desktop apps, I'd like to invite up Paul Gubbayga and Sarah Hunt.
Thank you. So our desktop teams have been on a roll. If you've been following along with the Creative Cloud launch in June, you know we had a huge launch then. And now, just 4 months later, we've got another killer release, another great set of features to share with you, showcasing some of our best work ever. Now, there were 3 areas that we really focused on for this release. The first one was this concept of connected creativity. We all have a creative profile. Now we can unlock the value of our content when it is stored in Creative Cloud, and that's going to change the way that we work. The second area was devices and touch. What would our applications, the applications that you use every day, what would they look like if touch was a first-class citizen when they run on those new 2-in-1 devices that we see coming into market? And the third area was, of course, Adobe magic. That's something special that just blows all of our minds away the first time we see it, something that only Adobe could do. So let's talk about the first area, connected creativity. Now, Jeff and Scott have already shown you the power of being able to take your content, connect it to your creative profile, and have it show up in Creative Cloud libraries inside of your desktop applications. I'm going to show you another great new feature that is also tied to your creative profile, and it is called Creative Cloud Extract. Now, I've got a couple of questions for you guys before I get started. How many folks here have ever designed a comp of a web page inside of Photoshop? Let's just hear a little applause for you guys. Lots of designers. How many people have ever built a web page based on a comp that you got from Photoshop? Let's hear it for you guys. All right. So we all know everybody uses Photoshop to design because of the power, the flexibility, and of course, it's the industry standard. But if we're being honest with ourselves, we also know that it can be a pain to get the assets and the information and the data that you want outside of your Photoshop file. Anyone who's familiar with this, you're probably familiar with the complexity of using slices, where you end up with documents that look like this and you try and pull apart the pieces that you want. And if you're not using slices, you're probably familiar with creating a new document for every single asset that you want to pull out of your Photoshop file. How many of us have been heads down, looked up, and realized that we're working on untitled -48 because it is literally the 48th asset that we're trying to get out of a Photoshop file? Well, guess what? That's the past. Who wants to see what the future looks like? I thank you for your confidence because I haven't shown you anything yet. So we are going to get started inside of Photoshop. Now, as a designer inside of Photoshop, I've got a comp of a web page that I'm working on. I want to pull something out of it. I want to get some assets out. I want to share them. And rather than doing all of that other stuff I just talked about, instead of all of that, I'm just going to select exactly what I'm interested in, which is these 3 or 4 icons. I'm going to select those icons. And then I'm going to choose Extract Assets. I want you to watch, because this happens very quickly. In one move, Photoshop has figured out what I've had selected, it's composited it down, it's trimmed it out, and it's added those icons as brand new assets inside of my asset queue, which is now connected to my Photoshop file. Now, this is a modeless dialog, which means I can move it around, I can move it off to a different screen, and I can continue to pick different things, select different things inside of my Photoshop file. Let's see, I've got another layer group here. I'm going to click on that. I'm going to choose Add, and in just a second, it's composited down and created another asset that's been added to my queue. Now, you'll notice that for each of those assets that are added, I can choose to change them in different, save them in different formats, and one of those new formats is now SVG. So I can actually export SVG out of Photoshop if I'm using shapes, if I'm using vectors. I now have SVG that will scale to multiple resolutions. Speaking of multiple resolutions, what about when you work with rasters? If you're familiar with doing this, like since you're targeting retina displays or different resolutions, you guys know that you have to recalculate each asset and you have to save for web time and time again. I don't have to do that anymore. All I have to do is select the resolutions that I want, and I can put as many different resolutions as I want in here. I click the extract button, everything's taken care of for me. Photoshop extracts all of them out, all the different resolutions in one move. It's awesome. And I'm just getting started because this is what I do as a designer in Photoshop. What's the next thing I want to do? I want to send this over to my web developer who's actually going to do the heavy lifting of pulling even more out of my Photoshop file. And that is incredibly easy to do because this is connected to my Creative profile. I'm simply going to click the link Open in Creative Cloud. I am now being taken to the cloud, into the browser, and I'm being taken to a synced version of the same Photoshop file that I was just working on inside of Photoshop on my desktop. But unlike other file sharing services, this is not a static preview. This is actually a live PSD. My web designer, my web developer, they can get all of the information that they want out of this Photoshop file right in the browser. And to show you exactly what I mean, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah, who is my web designer and also happens to be the product manager for Dreamweaver and Edge Animate. And Sarah, why don't you show folks what you can do once I've shared my file with you in Creative Cloud?
Great, thanks, Paul. So Paul has invited me to collaborate with him in Creative Cloud. I'm logged in with my Creative profile over here. And this is a live PSD. You can interact with all the Photoshop layers because this is what you get when you store your Photoshop documents in Creative Cloud. Creative Cloud now gives you a style guide that's unique to all of the design contents of this PSD. I can see all the gradients and all the colors and all the fonts that make up this design. Now, I'm a web designer, and I need to get CSS out of here. And Extract makes it really easy for me to do. When I click on a Photoshop layer, I can immediately see how that layer translates into CSS. And I can... Pretty cool, right? And I can take this CSS, I can use it in any editor I want, and this is great for letting me preserve the integrity of the design when I go to code. Now, I also need to get measurements out of here. I know how I've done this inside of Photoshop by drawing rectangles to use as fake rulers between this layer and this layer. But inside of Extract, I can just click on the layers I want, and right away it tells me, hey, there's 42 pixels of space between there. That's awesome. It's the little things, right? So looking inside of my assets queue, I can see all the images that Paul created for me in Photoshop, since we're connected in Creative Cloud. And it looks like he forgot to send me one of the icons I needed. But that's OK, because I can just click on the layers I want. And when I click on the Extract button, I'll keep that a ping file. This gets added to my assets queue and is ready for me to download and use in my web project.
That's awesome. So, Sarah, this is basically like Firebug or Web Inspector for a PSD file when it's stored in Creative Cloud. And you get to do all of this directly inside of the browser.
Yep, all in the browser, Paul. I didn't even need to have Photoshop installed to do any of this.
That's awesome. So, thanks. So you see Creative Cloud Extract. You saw it working inside of Photoshop as a designer, trying to pull the assets that I want. You see it working inside of the web browser for my web developer, Sarah, who can get everything she wants. But I know, Sarah, that you and the team have been thinking about taking this a whole step forward from here and thinking really about web designers. And of course, many web designers use Dreamweaver. I know you guys have been doing some pretty magical things there. Why don't you share with us what you guys have been working on?
Well, I have the new version of Dreamweaver right here in front of me. One thing that you'll notice is new is that you have access to your Creative Cloud storage, because we've done a lot of work to make it really easy for you guys to take your PSDs to the web. And so here's that PSD that Paul sent me, so I'll go ahead and open that up. And you have access to all of the same functionality that we showed you inside of the browser. You can access your styles and interact with layers, but there's so much more you can do since Dreamweaver is connected to Creative Cloud. Now, I started a wireframe of this website, so I've opened that up. And the first thing I want to do is get this gray and black gradient I have out of here. Now, normally to do this, I would have to do something like go to cssgradientgenerator.com or fight with color pickers in Photoshop. But I can code hint directly into this PSD. You can see I have my Photoshop layer selected here. And when I push Enter and start typing, I have all of those code hints that are being pulled right out of that Photoshop layer. And when I start writing, there's that gradient I want, and I get a nice little thumbnail of what that's going to look like. And when I push Enter, all of the colors I needed, all of the gradient stops, all the vendor prefixing, that exact style I needed was right there for me.
So I want to just take a step back here, because this is definitely Adobe magic, something only Adobe could do. We're basically saying that from this point forward, if you're using Dreamweaver, you can now code hint in real time into any PSD file that is stored in Creative Cloud and shared with you, which I think is huge. And Sarah, this is not just about getting out gradients. This is colors, fonts, images, measurements, anything that you want to be able to pull out of the file.
Well, I'm glad you brought up fonts, Paul, because I need to style the headers for my website. Now I'm going to click on this Photoshop layer that has type in it, and I can see all of the type styles. And I don't really need the font size or the line height here, so I'll just tick those off. I'll copy that CSS to my clipboard right inside of Dreamweaver, and I can paste that onto the selector I want inside of Live View. And when I paste that, all of those type styles get brought over, making it really easy for me to style a typography in my website. Now there's one more thing that I need to get out of here, and of course that's images. And Paul, it really doesn't get much easier than what you can do inside of Dreamweaver. So I have this Photoshop layer selected here. I have this happy-looking guy. He's so happy to be here on stage at MAX. Look at him. When I drag this around, you can see that I can control exactly where I want to place that image inside of my document. So I'm going to go ahead and place that here. And I can change the file format I want. I don't want to make that a PNG. Let's just say I want to name that a JPEG. And when I push Enter, this image gets downloaded from Creative Cloud. It's going to get trimmed down to the exact size I need, ready for me to use in my web project, saved to my hard drive.
Yeah, this is awesome. As web designers, extracting images out of Photoshop file is something we do all the time. And you've basically taken 5 or 6 steps, and you've literally brought them down to one drag and drop operation, which is awesome, Sarah. Now, I notice also that as you're going through this, you have the new live view in Dreamweaver open, and I can see that everything you're doing is actually happening in real time. You're not even hitting a refresh button. I see all the changes taking place there. Exactly. Why don't you share with us a little bit about what you guys did in Dreamweaver for the new live view?
Well, we realized that the web is changing at an incredible pace, and in order for us to keep up with that pace, we had to change the way that our live view worked. So we've done a lot of work with Chromium rendering, so everything previews in HTML5, and we're really taking advantage of that 64-bit processing, so you can really see those changes quickly as you build up your website. And this is great for saving you all those back and forth round trips to the browser just to do a quick preview. So you guys, if you are using Photoshop documents on the web, or if you're still on an older version of Dreamweaver like CS6, there's going to be a ton of stuff in this release that's really going to help you expedite your web development projects.
Thank you so much for your time, Sarah. I appreciate it. Creative Cloud Extract, fundamentally going to change the way that designers and developers work together. Now, the second area that we really focused on was devices and touch, and of course, some of that amazing Adobe magic. And you've already seen some of the great work that Scott and the mobile team have been doing on touch. It's really amazing. So we took a step back on the desktop teams, and we said to ourselves, what if touch could also play an incredible role inside of the desktop applications that people use every day? Photoshop, Illustrator. What would that look like? How powerful could that be? And with these new devices that are now coming to market that are actually powerful enough to run creative professional software and give you access to the microphone and the camera and, of course, touch. Well, we think this is a huge area of investment for us as we move forward, and we're just getting started. And to show you exactly what that looks like, I'd like to introduce Michael Ninnis. Michael is the leader of our design segment at Adobe. Sounds like some of you know Michael. And Michael is going to share with all of us the latest release of a product that we all love and know, Adobe Illustrator, with magical support for touch. Take it away, Michael.
Thank you, Paul. So what we're seeing here is the full version of Adobe Illustrator running on a Microsoft Surface Pro 3 with the keyboard attached. What we've done is we've developed a new workspace that takes advantage of the unique characteristics of this two-in-one device, notably the touchscreen and the pressure-sensitive pen. Now, as you might expect, if we take the keyboard off the Surface Pro 3, Illustrator automatically switches to this new workspace. And you'll see it kind of looks instantly familiar, but a little bit different at the same time. Now, it being a touch device, of course, we've got the gesture support for panning and zooming, as you might expect, but there's much more to it than that. We've actually developed a new set of tools and new interactions to get this to work. There we go. OK, so one of the first new tools I'm going to show is the touch curvature tool. I'm going to go ahead and draw a heart shape. Now, you may think that's an actually easy shape to draw. It's actually pretty complex if you've never mastered the regular pen tool. As I draw, you'll see I get a nice little preview of the curves I'm going to get as I hover over the canvas. Because I want to draw a heart shape, I want this to be a corner point. So to convert that, I just double tap and keep drawing. Go down to the bottom of the heart. Again, I want that to be a corner point, so I double tap to convert it, and I go back to the end to complete it. So you'll notice I didn't have to switch between different versions of the pen tool. I didn't have to know secret keyboard shortcuts. Best of all, I didn't have to deal with those Bezier handles. Who thinks that's awesome? All right. So as I complete that heart, I want to go ahead and give it a red fill and stroke. And I showed you a second ago, we had the gesture support for panning and zooming. You can use those same gestures to directly manipulate objects. Bum, 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 bum. I really like touch. I can even rotate just using the rotate gesture and so forth. This just really changes how it feels to work inside Illustrator, being able to directly manipulate those objects on the screen. One of the things I do often when I'm creating logos or icons in Illustrator is that I'll trace a reference image. I'm going to go ahead and trace this avocado using that touch curvature tool again. And you'll see as I'm doing this, I'm not really having to think about it all that much. I'm just dropping down points, and Illustrator's automatically creating those pleasing curves. If I need to adjust a point on a path, I just tap and drag it to its new position. Again, not having to deal with the Beziers if I don't want to. Go ahead and draw the pitch shape as well. And let's go ahead and finish this off by styling it with some swatches. You'll notice that as I'm working on the Surface Pro, sometimes I'm switching to my finger, sometimes I'm switching to the stylus. It really doesn't matter. It's whatever's more comfortable at any given moment as you're working through the interface. And there's that finished avocado. All right, let's take a look at what it's like to create a logo exploration just using some basic shapes. I'll go ahead and draw 3 circles here, like so, 3 different sizes. And we'll draw a couple diagonal lines as well. And to turn this into a logo, I actually want to select all these objects and then align them. We have a new touch optimized version of the Align panel as well. So instead of that grid of 12 little icons you get to memorize in InDesign, Illustrator, or Photoshop, watch what happens as I hover over that touch panel with the stylus. Yeah, pretty sweet. You get a little preview of what's going to happen. So I can align them all at the top, or I'll just tap the center to align them in the centers. I'm going to switch to one of my favorite tools in Illustrator. It's the Shape Builder tool. And that's used to quickly merge or subtract overlapping shapes. It's a lot more fun when you use it with a stylus. I joke, I call it Pathfinder on a stick. I'm going to go ahead and choose my fill color. And I'm just going to quickly merge the shapes that I want to combine into this logo exploration. I'll switch to an orange, pick that shape there. I'm going to switch the subtract mode. I'm just going to quickly swipe through and draw through the elements I don't want to make up that logo. To finish this off, we'll go ahead and get rid of that stroke. And you can see, just with a few basic shapes, using that Align panel and then using Shape Builder with that stylus, dare I say it's actually fun to experiment inside Illustrator here. Awesome. All right, one of the things that I love about the Surface Pro 3 is being able to draw directly on the screen with this very precise, pressure-sensitive stylus. You can see I've got the variable strokes. The harder I press, the thicker the stroke, of course. I'm going to go ahead and complete this leaf drawing. So I'm going to lower the brush width just a little bit. Get it to where I want it. When you're nervous, your hand is shaking just a little bit. All right, so I'm going to draw in some of those additional leaves. And you'll see as I do this, I'm not really all that accurate, am I? Some of the paths are open, some of them are overlapping, because I want to show you yet another new tool. It's called the Join tool. And watch what happens when I simply draw over those paths. Awesome. All right, to finish that off, let's go ahead and give it a green fill color. And we'll switch back to that brush tool and paint in those center lines. Awesome. All right, in June we released Ink and Slide, and you saw the digital version of that, the touch slide ruler. I don't know about you, but as an Illustrator user, I was really jealous. It's like, man, I want that inside Illustrator. Anyone agree? So in the new Touch workspace, we have the new Stencil tool. And you'll see that we've got some shapes that I can draw with, trace with. I've got the French curves. So I can go ahead and make that French curve just a little bit bigger, scale and rotate it. And this makes it easy to create these really complex curves, as long as I have a stroke color you guys can actually see. There you go. So I can just trace on screen directly with that. And do that a couple times. I'll switch to the digital ruler, and there's that touch slide ruler to draw parallel lines and keep them in parallel as I draw. So let's go ahead and draw the first line, draw a second one, and I'm going to create a lightning bolt really quick just by knocking out these lines. We'll rotate that into position. And we'll draw 2 more to finish this off. I can scale that down just a little bit. And then to finish this off, again, I'll go back to that shape builder tool, and we'll just merge the lines that we care about, and we'll get rid of the lines we don't. So you can see it's just a little playful experience to draw directly on the screen like that. And there you have it. That's just a taste. It's just a taste of what it's like to use Illustrator on a 2-in-1 device. I guarantee you if you try this yourselves, it's going to be really hard to go back to use Illustrator with a mouse. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. The new Illustrator. So as you guys can see, we have been very, very busy on the desktop. You've seen the power of taking all of your content, moving into your Creative Cloud libraries, because it's now connected to your Creative Profile, and the things that we can do inside the desktop applications once we have that content. You've seen the Creative Cloud Extract feature also tied to your Creative Profile, and you've seen that inside of Photoshop, you've seen that in the browser, you've seen that inside of Dreamweaver. Speaking of which, you got a glimpse of the new 64-bit modernized version of Dreamweaver, and of course the new Illustrator with great support for touch, leading the way for our other desktop applications. And there's so much more. There's simply not enough time to show you the hundreds of new features in this release. Features like synchronized text in Muse, or the new GoPro Cineform support inside of Premiere, or the new interactive EPUBs inside of InDesign. But that's okay, because if you are a Creative Cloud member, you get to download all of this software and you get to play with it right away. So thank you so much for your time. Enjoy.